Canada has a strong legacy within the United Nations. A founding member, this country has been there since the beginning. As our former UN representative Bob Rae stepped down, a former Liberal MP and federal justice minister has stepped in. David Lametti has just finished his very first week as Canada's ambassador to the United Nations, and he joins us now. Welcome, Ambassador.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
First question, most important question. How are you settling in?
I am settling in. It's been a hectic week. In addition to the work here at the United Nations and the mission, there's also the usual settling in after changing your, moving into a different apartment in a different country and trying to set up all the administrative things that one has to do in order to live in this day and age. But it's great. I'm pleased to be here. I'm pleased to be serving our country here, and so far so good.
Well, Canada has a significant legacy with the United Nations, but our contributions have changed over the years, especially in regards to peacekeeping on the ground. Talk to me about how that's changed our status within the UN.
Well, peacekeeping remains important, and Canada's status within the UN is still important. We're still an incredibly important contributor to a variety of different kinds of projects and missions in and around the world. For example, Haiti, we're the second biggest financial contributor with the United States, and then of course Kenya up until now has been the provider of military peacekeepers. So we're still important, and peacekeeping is still important. There are other aspects of the UN mandate, for example, financing for development, in which my two predecessors, Bob Rae and Marc-André Blanchard, both had a role, and I suspect that will continue. Our role will evolve within the UN as Canada's needs and priorities evolve, and as the UN's needs evolve. There's a lot of reform that's happening here, and hopefully that will bear fruit very soon.
Well, your predecessor, Bob Rae, has said, and this is a quote, "George Orwell's 1984 is the single best guide to what's going on in the world today." Would you agree?
I would never disagree with Bob. I mean, to put it bluntly, I think that's true. There are so many things that are happening right now. Shifting alliances. We're moving from we moved from the Cold War in our lifetime to a single polar world in which the United States was the only major player in economic and military terms. Now to a multipolar world in which there are a number of significant players, both again in economic and military terms. We have to figure that out. There are a number of overriding challenges that exist in the world today. Some of them as a result of technology, some of them as a result of climate change, some of them as a result of just general conflicts between and among nations. And so we have to work all that through. And maybe not 1984, but certainly it is a complex, complicated, and often scary world. And the UN has to play a role in that. As imperfect as it is as an institution, it has to be there. And Canada has to be at the UN. And frankly, so does everybody else.
You mentioned Haiti earlier, and Canada has made another big investment in security of that country. How is it going to be used?
Well, it looks like we're moving towards a gang suppression force. It's an initiative that's being led by the United States. We're hosting in the Canadian mission in early December a strategic and I suppose encouragement meeting to get more countries involved, both on the financial support side and on the peacekeeping support side. We're optimistic that with the support of the United States and Canada and other countries, we feel that there's a real chance that we can move forward on trying to make Haiti a much more secure place to begin with, and then lay the groundwork for political reform, democratic reform, economic reform. And the Haitian leadership itself is understanding of that, of those goals. We just need to suppress the gangs first so that there can be peace and stability within Haiti itself.
Do you feel Canada could help Haiti with actual boots on the ground?
I'm not, for the time being, our commitment is only financial. Again, we had a meeting again just yesterday, and with other potential countries in the Francophonie, as well as this meeting on December 9th, where we will be asking other countries to step up with respect to the peacekeeping forces. So it is my understanding that our contribution will be in terms of leadership support and financial support. That's where we are. And hopefully other countries will step up, and hopefully we will all work together to get to a good result.
Well, in another big issue, the UN Secretary General has called climate change a, quote, dangerous and existential threat. The UN's climate change meeting, COP30, just wrapped with not a lot of agreement on how to move forward. What came out of it?
Well, I haven't gotten the full briefing yet on what came out of COP this week. I've been concentrating on the mission in New York City. We certainly will look. Climate change remains an existential issue. What differs are the strategies and means to combat it, as well as the strategies and means to mitigate the fallout. Whether it's in physical mitigation of physical infrastructures and that sort of thing, or whether it's in mitigation regarding the movement of peoples as a result of climate change. So we will look at all that. I'll look more carefully at what has come out of COP30, working with obviously the ministers in Canada who are responsible for portfolios that touch upon the climate mandate, as well as with the Prime Minister, as well as with the team here in New York and our experts, and then we'll push it forward. But right now, it's too early for me to pronounce on that.
Prime Minister Mark Carney believes Canada has, quote, a mandate to strengthen and diversify our international partnerships. What are the challenges with countries like, say, U.A.E., which the Prime Minister just made an investment deal with?
I think the Prime Minister is absolutely correct in saying that we need to diversify our economic partnerships. The events of the last 8 months or so have shown us that we need to do that as a priority, that we can't simply rely on the traditional North-South economic relationship that we've had in the past, and frankly was successful and beneficial to Canada in the past. But that is changing. And so we need to look to other countries. The Prime Minister has traveled he's in the U.A.E. or coming back right now. He's traveled to Asia, he's traveled to Europe, and he will continue to try to build those kinds of relationships. It's a complex world. Every country carries its own complex challenges with respect to economic relationships and with respect to social standards. We won't hesitate to be honest with respect to our values, but we understand that there will be some divergence from time to time, and we will do our best to, frankly, walk and chew gum at the same time. We will do our best to make these economic relationships work. And we will do our best to use those economic relationships as a means, as a lever to advance human rights and other standards that we believe in as a country.
Ambassador Lametti, good luck in your new role, and thank you very much for joining us on the West Block.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Relationships with countries like the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia can be a double-edged sword. While there are plenty of financial benefits, are the human rights concerns worth the cost? Dennis Horak was Canada's ambassador to Saudi Arabia, and he joins us now. Mr. Ambassador, let's back up a little bit. And when you were Canada's ambassador to Saudi Arabia, the two countries got into a little bit of a diplomatic fight. Canada tweeted that Saudi Arabia should release human rights activists, and Saudi barred you from their country. Just last week, Donald Trump welcomed the Saudi Crown Prince to the Oval Office, downplaying any human rights offenses. What did you think of that when you saw it?
Well, I think with President Trump, I thought he was a lot overboard in dealing with some of the human rights issues that were raised during the press conference. For example, his denigration of Jamal Khashoggi, for example, I thought was way beyond the pale. But the issue of human rights is always one, I think, that we have with Saudi Arabia and a number of other countries in the world, certainly. Whether it's best addressed in a press conference situation is a whole other question, or on tweets or other sort of social media. There are ways to have these kind of dialogues in front of the press or on social media. I don't think is a way to do it productively.
Well, our prime minister invited that crown prince to the G7 in Alberta, and although he declined, why do you think the invitation was extended in the first place?
The reality is that Saudi Arabia is an important country, both regionally, because in relation to, for example, the peace process between the Israelis and the Palestinians, but also more broadly around the Gulf in terms of Gulf stability. So there's that regional aspect, and they are players, and they can't be ignored. And obviously, globally, their role in the oil market is crucial. So whether we have differences with them or not, the reality is they are key players in issues that are of concern to us, and to have a dialogue and engagement with them, I think, is important.
Well, moving on to the U.A.E. now, Mark Carney just got that country to invest up to $70 billion in Canada. There are serious concerns, though, about that country fueling ethnic violence in Sudan. Talk to me about the optics here for our prime minister. What does it say? How does he look making this deal?
Well, I think he looks good in terms of advancing Canadian interests. The reality is that ideally, we would, in an ideal world, we would trade only with countries, or have commercial relationships only with countries that have democratic values, that we have shared values with, a sort of like-minded group, if you will. But I'm not sure that world exists. And if it ever existed, it certainly doesn't now, with the way the world economic situation is in such turmoil for a variety of reasons. The number of countries that are key players in the international supply chains who are not democratic. The reality is, especially in these difficult times for Canada, as we're looking to diversify our interests and we're looking to diversify our markets, dealing with a country and our investment possibilities, dealing with a country like the U.A.E., which has vast resources that they're willing to invest in various countries and various industries, is crucial, particularly at a time like this for Canada.
And there's a balance that needs to be struck, doesn't it, between what we need from other countries in terms of trade, our values as a country. Sometimes those things butt up against each other. As someone with experience in the diplomatic corps, how far can diplomacy go in helping get the other side to see perhaps a better path forward?
Well, for a country like Canada alone, obviously our influence is very limited. We do often work in conjunction with other partners, particularly the Europeans, in trying to advance particular issues of concern. We would do it sometimes quietly. We'd have meetings, etc. The other thing is, when we engage with these countries across a broad spectrum, whether it's economically, commercially, politically, diplomatically, you get access to key decision makers, and when you have access, you have an opportunity for influence. The other thing is, often also what's not generally, I don't think, recognized as much, is there are things we can do on the ground that can have an impact if we're engaged with them across a broad spectrum. Saudi Arabia was a classic example in terms of the number of students that would come here, many of whom would go back and become agents of change in Saudi Arabia on the ground. Sort of one particular Halifax graduate, for example, went back, Dalhousie graduate, I should say, went back and started a company that was dedicated to helping women enter the workforce. Those are the sorts of impacts we can have on the ground if we're engaged with these countries and have a broad relationship.
And I think that's the ideal outcome. It's a realistic, ideal outcome. But is there anything about trade with the U.A.E. that causes you concern as far as security?
There are some issues related perhaps to the sale of military hardware. There is a Canadian factory, I believe, in the U.A.E. that is producing vehicles that may or may not be going down to Sudan, which is problematic. But it's difficult. It's difficult to have those sorts of end user controls. And we do have to worry a little bit on how some of the kind of controls we might want to put on some of those things would have, what sort of impact it would have on our broader commercial relationship. So it is a very delicate issue, and it's very difficult to manage those issues in a way that's very effective. But certainly it's an issue that we can have a dialogue with the U.A.E. about whether these vehicles are being used by the RSF, for example, in Sudan, and various other sorts of discussions we can have about the end use of some Canadian materials. And that is a very difficult and touchy issue from time to time.
Well, let's play that hypothetical out. What would happen in a situation where we've deepened our trade ties with a country like U.A.E., and then we find out that the military vehicles that we sent their way were used in a manner that we would not have agreed to? What happens next?
It's tough. I mean, again, it depends on the nature of the agreement that we have. If, for example, if we're exporting vehicles from Canada, often they will have some sort of export end user agreement or sort of stipulation into it. And if it's violated, certainly then that becomes an issue that needs to be dealt with on a bilateral basis and could become a major irritant. And it's something that would have to be dealt with. I mean, ultimately, I suppose the exports could be stopped. That could have broader impacts on our relationship. Particularly if it's a relationship that we've neglected for years and years, which is basically what happened with Saudi Arabia. There was no engagement since, well, from the time the Trudeau government took power. And so it made it easier for them to just retaliate against us. If we have a much broader commercial relationship, say with the U.A.E., and they're benefiting in a number of different ways, and we have this one irritant perhaps dealing with these vehicles, for example, that's something that could perhaps not have as much of a massive impact on our overall relationship if we actually have one, and if it's one that we've actually cultivated. So it's about not shielding our particular irritants, but having them part of a broader agenda as opposed to being the entire agenda.
Ambassador Horwick, thank you very much for joining us today.
My pleasure.